going on, everybody? Welcome to NOVA Building Stuff. Here we are on Twitch again this wonderful Wednesday. This is NOVA Building Stuff. What is NOVA Building Stuff? This is your virtual makerspace, your ideation laboratory, your mastermind. This is the place where we get to hang out and build together. I'm your host, Dr. Nee. Long name, Dr. Nehemiah Mabry. But it's all good because I'm your compadre, I'm your companion, I'm your buddy, I'm your mentor. Sometimes I'm your mentee, depending on what we're doing that day. At the end of the day, all we want to do here is build together. And so I need to know how y'all feeling today. Go ahead and drop in chat. Drop in chat an emote, a visual, some sort of image to let me know how you feeling today, because I need to know how you feeling. I'm feeling pretty good, and I hope you're feeling what I'm feeling. And matter of fact, if you're right here, I would give you a hug. That's just how good I'm feeling today. I would give you a hug unless you didn't want a hug, and then I wouldn't force a hug on you. But I need to know how you feel. Let me know how you feel virtually. I'm looking in the chat right now, and I want to see what type of emotes we have coming through. Shout out to the stimulator. We see you. We see you. All right, Trailblazers, get to see you. Shout out to everybody. I love the new emotes. Shout out to the team. Got your boy in the emotes. Fire emojis, fire emotes herself. Good to see y'all. Hey, here's the thing I want to know. If you are here for the very first time, let us know where you're from, where you're tuning in from. Now is a good time, whether you are old or a new viewer, to hit that follow button as well if you haven't. So I need to know how you're feeling. Continue to come through with the emotes. Virtual hugs. Oh, I welcome those virtual hugs. Thank you so much, Stimulator. But again, if you're new, if you haven't chatted once, even if you've watched before, but you haven't typed anything, let us know where you're coming in from. We need to know who's joining us here on NOVA Building Stuff. And I'm going to tell y'all right now, today, you're in for a special treat. Today, you're in for a special treat because we're going to revisit something that we talked about before. But again, if this is your first time, you're in luck because we have another guest that's going to join me today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about him in a second, but let's check out our agenda, all right? What you see on my right here, on my left, your left, my right, whatever it is virtually, you can see the agenda right here, right? And so I'm starting out with the welcomes. Again, I want to see the emotes. Let's see how people are feeling. Shout out to Future Doctors, our regular who is hanging out. Welcome to the building community for those who are just tuning in. But we got this welcome, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit about my friend, Jake Voorhees. We're going to talk about the Baltimore bridge collapse, also known as the Francis Scott Key Bridge, that happened a little over 2 to 3 months ago. We're going to break that down. And you know what? He has a background and a unique perspective. We're both from similar fields. We both went, and let me tell y'all this. I don't know if you know, but like civil engineering is broad, right? Civil engineering can involve structures like yours truly, but it also can involve transportation and traffic. And so he's going to bring that perspective as someone who grew up in that region. So we're going to bring him on in just a second. After that, or at some point in the middle of our interview, we're going to throw a quiz on. We're going to see who's with us. Shout out to Zoeris. We see you. Shout out for the love. We're going to quiz y'all. We're going to see if you all can give us some insight from your perspective, what you're picking up from our conversation. And then we're going to get back to the interview. All right, we're going to get back to the interview. But I want to tell y'all something. In this particular stream, I have a word that I think would motivate you, maybe encourage you, that's really based on this whole idea of like how disasters happen, how collapses happen. So here's the question I'm going to ask for everybody in the chat. I want to ask you this question. What is the earliest like disaster you remember happening, you know, just in your life? Like if you just think back, some people probably say, oh man, I remember when 9/11 happened, or, you know, I remember maybe something on a local scale happened. I don't know. Maybe it was something global. I don't know. Maybe it was the certain uprisings and whatever. Like what was the biggest thing that you remember as you think back? Again, this could be a global scale. This could be a national scale, or this could even be like on a local scale. I'm really curious. Let me know in the chat, because here's the thing. When it comes to these particular catastrophes, these disasters, I actually think that like they serve as turning points in many regards. And I'm going to tell you right now, like for me, like one of the things, okay, shout out to Kajo, Hurricane Sandy. Yes, hurricanes really big. 9/11. Thank y'all for putting in the chat. I'm going to tell you what I remember, and this one is more of a personal one, right? So I was like in the second grade. I remember I was in the second grade, and I remember this vividly because my parents just bought me like some brand new light up shoes. If y'all remember when you were a kid, like those are shoes that you would walk on, and whenever you walk, it would like flash underneath. So my parents bought me some light up shoes in the second grade, and I was so excited to wear those to school. And so I wore those to school this particular day in my second grade year, went showing it off. You know, they weren't the name brand kind, for those who know what I'm talking about. But listen, they still did the same thing. My parents got them for, you know, they got them for an affordable price, right? So I remember getting to school, showing them off. I was so proud. Second grade year, a year where I began to like really express myself, participating in little league sports, you know, trying to develop my own like fashion sense, so to speak. 7 years old was a pivotal moment for me, in particular because of this event. Because I remember after school's over, I'm proud of my brand new shoes. I get picked up from school from a family friend. They pull up and say, hey, your parents, they actually taking care of some business, but you're going to come over our house. And so I remember we went over the house. I get to the house and I see my older sister. I'm still walking in with my fresh white light up shoes. And so she comes up to me. Again, I'm talking about the disaster that I remember, my earliest one. And she says, Nehemiah, our house burned down. I'm talking about disaster, y'all. Shock, horror. I don't even know what to have thought at that point. And I remember looking down at my light up shoes and saying to myself, man, I guess this is all I have. I thought about all of my toys. I thought about my trophies. Like it took a few days before we can go back and see the damage. And the house wasn't like completely burned down, but it definitely was total, so to speak, in terms of a structure. I'm going through looking at my my football trophies, and like it's melted. My football trophy looks like a swimming trophy now. Like the dude went from, and now he's swimming. Like it was crazy. Like the basketball trophy, the dude was like in like a yoga pose. It was crazy. Like disaster. I couldn't believe it. And in that particular moment in the second grade, it actually represented a pivot for me, a pivot. And I want to tell you what pivot took place. In fact, I will tell you, but we're going to talk really for a second again about the Francis Scott Key collapse, because again, this is another moment that was very devastating for a number of people. And the person I have to join me today to talk about that, and none other than my good friend, Jake Voorhees. Let me show you Jake Voorhees really quick. Here is his bio on the screen. Here's his bio on the screen. And if you don't know, Jake is a civil engineer, as I just said. Civil engineer. He specializes in sort of the traffic transportational disciplines. He is also an engineering student mentor. He's a startup co-founder, a marketer, TEDx speaker, YouTube, and community organizer. And here's what's super relevant to y'all, chat. In 2018, Jack launched a YouTube channel focused on helping emerging students pitch themselves and navigate their career journey. So Jake is a phenomenal guest to have on the show. He grew up around the Baltimore region, and we're going to have him in just a second. So I need you all to get ready, chat. I love that people are dropping their feedback here. But now I need to go ahead and get some welcome energy coming as we bring to the stream on NOVA Building Stuff. Put your hands together for my friend, fellow engineer, Jake Voorhees. Jake, welcome, my friend. Welcome.
Thank you, sir. Hello, NOVA Build. Dr. Nee, it's great to be here. Great to be collaborating with you again after a little bit of time. And what a great topic. You know, I grew up in Maryland. I'm also a civil engineer. I love that you talked about the differences in civil engineering. I think it's one of the wider engineering core sections in the engineering world.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we get to do is, yeah, it's a disaster and a travesty when bad things happen, but people like you and I have to figure out what went wrong, what we can learn from that, and that's what today is all about.
Like, do you agree that, like, kind of what I was setting up with, like the fact that, like, when the disasters happen, when things take place, there's like a opportunity to like pivot and to move forward in that regard? Jake, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, I can hear both of you. Did something go wrong?
Yeah, no, you're good. You're good. You just froze a little bit on the screen. Shout out to chat. All right, we got the hands coming. Yeah, did you hear so my question was, again, like, you know, sometimes and similar to what I talked about, like there are times when like something can happen, as what happened to me when I was 7 years old, and as what obviously happened to the city of Baltimore and things like that, that can be like a pivot point, right? A pivot point in however the future trajectory is going to go. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the catch-22 of issues and disasters is that, again, you got to learn from it, and what can we glean from this and go forward and be smarter and avoid disasters in the future. So, yeah.
Got you. Can you tell us really quick, and I'm going to go to this screen share of you really quick. This has to do with your, not only your background, but your YouTube channel, right? For those who don't know, you started a community called the 1% Engineer Community, right? And you were empowering young engineers to rise to the top of 1% in their career. And we got a lot of engineers, formally, informally, however you want to define it, here on this chat. Shout out to everybody again that's watching. Shout out to the building committee, as we call them, Jake. But I was just curious to know out the gate, can you tell me, like, what was sort of like that early? Do you have any stories that you remember very early when you first started down this whole path of engineering?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my father was a carpenter, and so he always was building things, and he also was the guy who would help with the blueprints on the jobs, and he had the vision and had the math aptitude. And so, I mean, I'm sure just like you, I grew up with Legos and Kinects and sort of putting all that stuff to work by the time I was like 8, 9, 10. And so, from as long as I can remember, the plan was like, okay, go be an engineer, just do like another level of what your dad was doing, but bigger, faster, stronger. So, yeah, all that clicked, and now engineers get to go out and change the world. I'm really glad it all happened. I'm really glad that people like you and I are empowering other people to be STEM professionals and engineers, because it really is a great thing in your career. So,
Okay, cool. Chat, I need some help really quick because I want to make sure that Jake is being heard. The audio's a little choppy from Jake. It cuts in and out. Oh man, so chat, let me know. Can you hear any complete sentences from Jake? Can you hear any complete sentences from Jake? And we're gonna try to get that right, Jake, because we need to make sure the folks can hear you as much as possible. Let's see. Oh man, all right. So check this out. Let's try this.
you two hear me okay?
YouTube, can y'all hear Jake really well? We're gonna see what we can clear up as much as possible.
Can you at least hear me okay?
I hear you perfectly. I don't know if our chat can hear you. Maybe it's a little bandwidth issue here. How's my volume? Chat? How's my volume? Is my volume good? We can get your audio good in just a second here. Jake, let me come back to my full screen. So Nee's volume is good. Jake, we're gonna come back to you in just a second. But what I want to make sure chat is able to hear you, because I know you got some great information that we're gonna talk about when it comes to Jake. Continue to talk as we get this thing figured out.
So try going to your audio settings on Zoom and see like what the output is going to.
Go ahead, Jake. You can go ahead and speak up a little bit more, man. We want to make sure you are.
It's really cool to be here because I grew up in Maryland, you know, and I grew up actually across the bay on the Eastern Shore. So we talked about these bridge crossings all the time as a family, and both my parents actually grew up on farms on the Eastern Shore. And so what we always talked about was the impact of these bridges in terms of allowing more development and access to the beaches and things like that. And we never once had conversations about what would happen if a bridge collapsed. And so it's really cool to see my life like come full circle here. And like 30 years later, here you and I are analyzing
Yeah.
this devastating collapse.
It's still choppy. So I wonder like
All right. So chat, can y'all hear Steph? She's coming through as well. Is she choppy when she pops up?
I'm also choppy.
Ooh.
It's not me. I'm on fixed Wi-Fi. Like there's no way. I'm on the best possible situation. So I don't know. Can you close stuff?
Yep. So I'm gonna try to close stuff really quick, chat, because we want to get them. All right. So Jake, I'll pause Jake for a second, and I want to show something to you all really quick as we get Jake ready to go here in a second, because we definitely want to make sure y'all here. He's come prepared to break some stuff down, and I'm not 100% sure why there is like such a choppy, why they're hearing such a choppy part of you, Jake. But we're gonna figure this out in just a few minutes. At least Ducktail said, at least there's a steady tempo to him breaking up. So there's a nice beat to it. We give it a nice rhythm. All right, y'all, bear with us as we figure this out, because we definitely want to get this going to go. I think it's a bandwidth thing, right? It might be a bandwidth thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close a few things here on my end. Let's quit my poly bridge, which is probably running in the background. You know, the poly bridge, the epic game that we've been playing. All right, so we're going to do that. We're going to also, let's see if we can close this. See if we can close here. See if we can close. We don't want to close where you're with us. All right. We're going to close.
Definitely close Adobe Premiere, dude.
Yeah. No doubt. All right, here we go. Let's see. We got. All right, we're gonna bring Jake back on here in just a second. Y'all tell me how he sounds here, because we definitely are troubleshooting this live. All right. Can you see this? All right. What do y'all hear right now with Jake? Is it still jumpy?
Check. Can you guys hear me okay? Does this sound a little bit better?
Mic check 1 2 1 2. Let me know. Yes, same. Oh man, Terror Blazers, what's going on? All right, Jake, we got to figure something out here live.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's jumping around.
Maybe you just go.
You want me to just go off the cuff?
Go, bro. Let's go, dude. Yeah. You don't want to lose the whole thing. Just go.
All right, so check this out, y'all. I'm going to Jake. Let's come back to you in here in a second. But right here we have the Francis Scott Key Bridge, as I already shared with y'all early on. All right, and the Francis Scott Key Bridge was something that happened to serve this area for a long time. And as we get this string, I'm gonna get my team in the background to see if we can figure out what's going on with our sound here. Is there echoing something? Because I hear him coming through Nee's mic. Is it clear coming through my mic? Are you clear coming through my mic, Jake? I mean, can y'all hear Jake coming clear through my mic? If you can, then maybe we can figure something out in that regard. Can you hear him coming clear through my mic? Nova says, we are working to troubleshoot. Thank you so much, Nova. Thank you so much for the background. Let's see, Jake.
We're doing a little audio test here. Test. How's this sound? Is it coming through your mic?
What about now, y'all? Between me and Jake on my mic, how do you hear it? Jake, can you see the screen share?
Yes, I can see the Francis Scott Key Bridge. Yep, you just changed it. Here's the impact. Yep.
All right. Can y'all hear me and Jake? I'm now echoey. Okay. Jake.
Yeah, you sound way different for me now too.
Yeah, but I want to make sure they can hear both of us. So when we're gonna have to share a mic really quick. Now it's knee is echoey. Okay, let's try this. One of us is gonna be echoey. Just to put that out there, y'all. And let's see. What about now? Can y'all hear both of us? Say test, Jake. Say test.
Check. Look how crazy this bridge impact looks. Look how big that container ship is. It's insane. Every time I see a photo.
So the crazy thing about this, right? It's better. It's muffled. He sounds muffled. All right. Hopefully we're gonna keep that. Go ahead and unmute, Jake. And I'm gonna try to we're gonna take turns talking. But go ahead and set us up, if you can do this, Jake. Set us up with the background of this bridge and your memory of it growing up in this region. Tell us a little about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was raised in Maryland. I'm actually from the smallest county in Maryland, not on the Baltimore side, but on the eastern shore of Maryland, closer to Delaware and Philadelphia. And so we as a family, we always grew up talking about these bridge crossings because there were so few of them. And we talked about the regional impact. Both my parents actually grew up on farms. And so generally the conversation when I was a kid, it was talking about the impact that they had on the development, on the farming community, the access to the beach towns and that sort of thing. But never once did we have conversations about what it would look like if a bridge were to disappear, just like we experienced in March. And so it's really crazy to see 30 years ago, now we're actually breaking this down and analyzing it. So yeah, that's my personal connection to the bridge, and it's really insane to see what's happened a couple months ago.
Really crazy. So when you think back on how this thing happened, right, which was in the middle of March, do you remember hearing about it? Because I don't think you live in the region now anymore, but you still had to hear about it, right, happening. Tell us a little bit about how you remember it taking place on that particular morning that this collapse took place.
Yeah, I remember actually getting the news from a friend or something like, "Hey, did you see what happened in Baltimore?" I'm like, "Wait, what?" And then looking at it, and I'll never forget looking at that video for the first time. It almost looked like, the World Trade Centers or like buildings that are like, you just couldn't believe how fast it dropped. And you and I are similar ages, but I was studying civil engineering while that Minneapolis bridge collapse happened. I think it was 2007. And so it's just so devastating and like almost like this emotional thing for a civil engineer to witness such a catastrophic collapse. Like these things really shouldn't happen, right? And that's why we're talking about it here today.
Yeah, and it symbolically kind of represents a lot for a lot of people because we know that it was named after, Francis Scott Key, right? Francis Scott Key, the author of the Star Spangled Banner, right? Here's a photo we have of a drawn photo of him, and then also a photo of the bridge taken in 1978. So I can imagine like when this thing first went up, I believe it was built, and you all can fact check me on this. I believe it was built in 1977. When this thing like went up, it had to be like, one of the like most impressive structures in that area at the time, right? Like it had to be super impressive. And so when you think about the history of it, obviously there was a number of things. Any history that you as an engineer, and again, someone from the region can kind of bring up about the bridge that comes to mind.
The only thing that I would add, most people know it as the Key Bridge, and then you look into the history of who Francis Scott Key was. And the only thing I would include in that is some Maryland history. Fort McHenry was the location right there. You can look at it geographically. It's in the Baltimore area where we had to defend against the British in the War of 1812, and that's when he wrote the Star Spangled Banner. And so a lot of people just call it the Baltimore Bridge or the Key Bridge, but no, it was named after Francis Scott Key, this person who had such an impact and wrote our national anthem. Other than that, I would encourage people to look at the Chesapeake Bay Bridge, which is over 4 miles long, and the only bridge longer than this one, the Key Bridge in Baltimore. So I would encourage you guys to look at Fort McHenry and the significance of why this bridge was named the Francis Scott Key Bridge and understand that role in our history. Then check out the double span Chesapeake Bay Bridge.
Yeah, there's some dope bridges in the area. And we got something really quick. I'm going to pause for this thing called a chat challenge, y'all. We have a chat challenge that we do here on NOVA. Again, if this is your first time here, let us know in the chat. Let us know where you're chiming in from. But those who have been a part of the building committee would know that we have something called a chat challenge. And our chat challenge today is there was an original name. It was an initial name, right, of this bridge before the name Francis Scott Key Bridge. Let's see if anybody in the chat can find out. Shout out to DuckTales. The Chesapeake Bay Bridge is also tunnel. That is good. That is good. Chat challenge though. I want to know if anybody know what this particular bridge was initially called before it was renamed after the poet Francis Scott Key. What was this bridge initially called? I got another dope picture here for you.
And while we're queuing that up, I want to respond to that last comment. There's actually two different facilities. There's the 4.4 mile long Chesapeake Bay Bridge, okay, which goes between the Eastern Shore where I grew up and Annapolis. And then there's the Chesapeake Bay Bridge and Tunnel System, which connects to actually Virginia. And it's a whole different part of the bay crossing. It's more like 20 miles long, and it's a whole different category of facilities. So good comment about the bridge and tunnel, but I do want to differentiate that's a whole different situation compared to the Chesapeake Bay Bridge.
Good point, Jake. Good point, Jake. Anybody knows what it was originally called before I spill the beans? This is a chat challenge for anybody who needs to know or who can find out. Let me say it like that. DuckTales, Chesapeake Bay, salute. You got a salute from DuckTales on that. Well, I'm going to let y'all know, if you couldn't find out already, this was a bridge that was initially named the Outer Harbor Crossing, right? That was the initial name of the Key Bridge, the Outer Harbor Crossing, but then it was renamed after the poet Francis Scott Key. All right. Shout out to anybody. Wasn't it a photo? The photo prior? Huh? Okay, here we go. Let's look at some other things. All right. When it comes to the collapse, right? Obviously, we know that this took place on March the 26th. It was March the 26th, 2024. It was struck by a large cargo vessel that was experiencing power malfunctions, right? This particular vessel was called the Dolly. That was the name of the ship. Yesterday, we talked about, for those who were hanging out in the building committee yesterday, we talked about why ships crash. Last week, Jake, we actually talked about why bridges collapse. So like today's stream really like combines both, right? We had a ship crash into this bridge, devastatingly, right? There were also, unfortunately, 6 construction workers that went missing in the collapse, right? And eventually they discovered, but they passed away as a result of the incident. When you think about the fact that, all right, there is this bridge that is built to provide transportation and vehicle traffic. Then you have the water passageway, which is bringing a lot of ships and cargoes into that region. What are some of the things that come to your mind when you think about just this whole like coming together of things that caused this accident?
Are you asking me?
Oh, that's you. That's you.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that what's interesting about these big engineering disasters, and, you know, you mentioned a few like 9/11, and you have major events like the Challenger explosion and things that go, you know, perpetuated into human conversations and even engineering studies. But really what I think about the most is that in order for something like this to happen, we're talking about a massive engineering catastrophe where you have human loss of life, you know, thoughts and prayers go out to their families. But really what it takes is a combination of all these unforeseen variables that come together in a way that we've never experienced before. And that's why we're talking about it, is because we need to learn and say, what can we do could we have prevented this? What can we learn? What can we do differently in the future? And that's really what engineering is.
Yeah, when I think about this too, a lot of people ask me like, yo, like, was it the bridge fault? Because whenever these things happen, Jake, like as a structural engineer, I get a lot of questions, right? A lot of questions about, you know, was the bridge designed correctly and things like that. And honestly, my first answer is like, I really don't know. Like I wasn't the designer, right? I haven't really looked closely at it. It's really tough to jump to conclusions. But one of the things I think it's important to point out is that while we do design structures over water in particular to be able to take impact from traffic there on the water and things of that nature, we do not design it for every type of impact that it could take. You know what I mean? So when you think about this particular ship, this ship was massively larger than the ships that were coming through that regularly when it was originally designed, right? We're talking about like this ship, it weighed over 100,000 tons, Jake. That's crazy, right? Over 100,000 tons. And so while it may have been designed to like actually have an impact or absorb an impact, 100,000 pounds of direct impact of a vessel. Now, let me clarify on that. Even though it's 100,000 pounds, Jake, it doesn't mean that it necessarily apply like 100,000 pounds of impact to it. And I'm gonna explain this real quick. I'm gonna go to what we do. This is something else we do, Jake, called our explainer cam. Chat, if y'all can see the explainer cam, we're gonna try here in just a second. Let me know by saying, yeah, I've gotten some feedback. Let me know. I see it in the chat. I got some feedback that we need to make sure that this is nice and focused. Yeah, Terrablazer, thank you for seeing it. All right, so here's the explainer cam, Jake. Jake, you see it? Thumbs up, you see it, man?
I don't.
Okay, I'm gonna make sure Jake can see it with us, chat, okay, because we want to make sure that Jake is with us on here. Jake, thumbs up, you see it, man?
Oh, yeah, I can see that.
All right, boom, boom, boom. All right, so when we're designing this, right? So you're talking about like, let's imagine that like we're looking down on the bridge, right? So if you had like the roadway here, right? This is the roadway. And somewhere at this point of the roadway, right, there is, again, we're looking down on it. There is like a pier or a column or something that's meant to support it. All right, y'all let me know if you can see it. Shout out to Peach Elliott with the truss bridge diagram. What we often do, right, if we put things and elements around it to make sure there is a way to like support it, right? Or not support it or protect it, right? So sometimes they have like fenders and things that they put around it to where if there are any like smaller boats coming through here or any type of other traffic happens to get close to that, it's protected. Another thing that we often have is this thing called, I think they call like dolphins, right? And sometimes dolphins are like these concrete things that stick out of the water, right? Why do we have these things, Jake? Well, we have these things because we know that there is a potential of something veering off course and actually hitting a support. However, this is not designed to where, again, any particular support, you know, any particular impact that hits it is going to be able to be absorbed. And so these things, each of these dolphins, each of these fenders have like a certain rating, a determining factor of how much it can resist. But it said that even with the slowing down of this particular vessel that is weighing over 100,000 tons, it still impacted the bridge here. It still impacted the bridge, some reports saying, at roughly around 20,000 tons of force. That's crazy, man. That's crazy. What comes to mind when you think of that, man?
Yeah, I mean it's insane just to think about 100,000 tons. Like you can't even really imagine that. And then the speed of the boat, it was going under 10 miles per hour. So still at such a slow speed, it doesn't matter because that's really what force is, right? It's mass times acceleration. It really doesn't matter how slow it is if it has so much mass. Think about a train, right? A train's moving so slow, but if it just taps a car, that thing flies. So this is a version of that. And to double down on what you said, think about 9/11 and some of these other crazy things. Like we don't really design buildings to withstand plane impact. This bridge was built in 1977, was completed in 1977. Boats were much smaller back then. Cargo loads were much smaller back then. This bridge was simply never designed to take such an impact of the dolly hitting it like it did.
That's a fact. And also, like, this thing is known as a fracture critical bridge. And I remember being able to like go out into the field and like actually inspect bridges. Let me see if I can bring up a photo of a similar type of bridge. So here's a truss bridge, right? So we have here on the screen like truss. We talked a lot about truss on like our games we played, Jake. And chat, let me know if y'all know what I'm talking about, right? We've played a lot of like truss building games. And with these truss building games, you know that like each of these smaller members are for a place to carry a significant load. Here's one of the things though about fracture critical bridges, right? Fracture critical bridges is a type of bridge where if you take one important part out, like one important member is removed, then it could potentially cause, full collapse, right? And that gets into the whole idea of like redundancy, which means that like if one member fails, can that load shift to another member? Well, back when these things were around this time, it's kind of hard to tell, but around this time, I believe that like certain codes around redundancy and making sure things aren't as fracture critical were just kind of coming into like the lexicon of us as designers. And so when you're designing bridges now, we often have to make sure that if there is a failure of certain pieces, it isn't as fracture critical, meaning that it can actually have or share the load with other members if certain members of it attempts to go down. Jake, I got a question, man. Chat, are y'all with me? Chat, if you're with me, drop an emote. Let me know if y'all still with me. Shout out to DuckTales, Zoeros. You see it, Zoeros. If you still see it and you still with us, let us know in the chat. We don't see. We got a dolphin. We got a dolphin emote. Shout out to everybody that's keeping us updated. Dr. OC, the mechanical engineer here, who is way out of practice. I'm curious how structural engineers account for static dynamics. Jake, that's a loaded question, right? I don't know if you want to tackle it. You could let me know if you want to tackle it. As a mechanical engineer, accounting for statics and dynamics, go ahead and answer it, and then I'll follow up after you.
Well, first we'll just point out that you have statics and dynamics are the same thing. So in a bridge, everything is generally static. You do have different fixed joints that might move around, but dynamics is when your whole system is moving. So for example, like analyzing the forces in an engine inside a car that's moving, that's dynamics. So it's really a statics conversation. Wouldn't you agree, Dr. Nee, when you're talking about?
Yeah, statics for sure. So statics means still, like not moving. And then dynamics means dynamics, like it can move and go slow, fast, or whatever. So that's a really good question. But here's what I always thought about too, even as a structural engineer who ideally, deals with things static. Like when you talk about swaying in the wind, when you talk about vibrations, like at the end of the day, there's some matter of dynamic movement taking place really at every level, right? Skyscrapers are going to sway in the wind, bridges. You're going to have like vibration as cars go across it. So that's a really good question. I'm really glad Dr. C brought that up. Shout out to you. Hey, and you all can keep your questions coming as we continue to talk. But here's what we're going to do right now, Jake. I think we have questions for them. We're going to do a quick quiz here on the screen here. And I'm going to change my view for this chat. All right. We got a quiz on the screen, and I need to make sure that you all are able to see it. Team, can we put our quiz on the screen so we can make sure people are able to see what our questions are? Because we want to know what your answers are and how much you are aware of some of the things that we've been talking about. So we're going to get the quiz on the screen right now as we are in my primary layout. And we got maybe 4 or 5 questions. We want to see if you all could answer these questions here before we go back to our interview with Jay. All right. Terra Blazers, shout out to those. Oh, I love the emotes. All right, team, can we get it on there? We got the our quiz on the screen. One second, y'all. We're gonna get the quiz here on my solo primary layout, so that you all can give us your feedback, your answers a little interactively. Feel free. Herself, I love that. I wonder who that is. Herself, who's that an emote of? I'm not sure who that is exactly, but I feel like that's a reference I should know. I am back here live with you all. Let me know if you can hear me, and I need to make sure you all can hear my friend that's below me on the screen. My friend who's below me on the screen, Jake. I want to know if Jake's audio is coming through good. We had to restart, y'all, because our audio was acting up a little weird in our last interview. Jake, say something for the people so they can see if they can hear you in the chat.
Yeah, test. I love the comment about how we got to get an audio engineer on here for future, not as a support person, but just to talk about the world of audio challenges, like what we're expecting.
Yeah, is he coming through? Somebody has me on loud on the back end. Oh, I know it is. Can y'all hear? Jake, go ahead.
Test. Trying this again.
Chat, can y'all hear Jake? Can't hear Jake. Barely hear Jake. I hear he's muffled. Is that it? Is he just low? Is that where we are?
Test. I'm always blown away looking at the size of this Dolly cargo container ship. So big. Look at that thing.
What about now, Jake? Can y'all hear Jake now? One more test, Jake. One more test.
Test. It's also insane how down the
entire. Oh, there he is. Hey, I think we saw. Let me say something really quick, Jake. I opened our last stream, or this stream, however you want to look at it, saying that in disasters, there's a C. There's a C. I think we just discovered something, and that is this. Every now and then, you're going to have technical difficulties in the middle of the stream. And the best thing to do is to look at this opportunity to reset, which is what we did. And now the people, we reset it, they can hear you coming through just as clear as they can hear me. So, Jake, you don't have to.
Really?
Yeah. Y'all can hear Jake? Give me an emote. I need an emote for people who are excited that we got the audio figured out. We just had to simply restart. That's all we simply did. We ended it, and we started over again. And our original challenges, as well as the recent ones, were solved. There you go. All right, y'all. So check it out. We're going to get Jake back here on the docket really, really quick. Shout out to everybody saying all a part of the engineering process. Yes, Peach Elliott, I love it. DuckTales with the dinosaur emotes. Go ahead and tell us something now about a little bit about on that same thought, right? On that same thought of, hey, there are times when things happen and there are opportunities to sort of learn and restart. What are some of the lessons that you would say we've learned from this particular crash as we look back on it?
Yeah, that's really the most critical part is what can we do differently and how can we learn from this? That's really what engineering is. So I think there's 3 things, and you kind of covered a few of them, or you briefly went through a few of them when you were drawing your diagram. But the first thing to talk about is not really the engineering aspect. It's really the timing of when this bridge was built. And then later on in, this year, 2024, this event that occurred. So you had a nice trivia question around the bridge. Another aspect of trivia with this incident is in 1980, 3 years after this bridge was built, the Francis Scott Key Bridge, there was a major bridge disaster in California where 35 people died. And that event, just like you have mentioned multiple times, Dr. Nee, that event in 1980 in California really did trigger an international relook at bridge design.
And the unfortunate aspect about this bridge is it predated that. It was opened up just 3 years before that. And you already mentioned that cargo ships were built. So anyway, we weren't really yet into this new paradigm of bridge design where we need to protect our piers. We need to really have the dolphins and these other aspects. But so that's just the first lesson here, is that all these bridges that were built before 1980 with that didn't have the opportunity to have this consideration of additional safety. Maybe we should be looking at additional resources to rehabilitate and to invest. Maybe it is worth it to invest in our bridges to readdress the safety, because as you can see, 6 people lost their lives. We have hundreds of millions of dollars of economic impact and delay for our economy and our infrastructure. So that's really the first comment, is that maybe we really do need to reinvest in some of our older bridges, just like this one. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, no, I definitely was thinking about that, because when I was studying, like doing a lot of research back in like my graduate school program, like we understood that like a lot of bridges aren't necessarily weak or structurally weak when it comes to like their ability to carry the load, but they're just functionally obsolete, right? Meaning that like the standards that we have today aren't the standards that they had when they were built. And so they need to be retrofitted, rehabbed in some respects, but ultimately just brought up to current functional servicing standards. And so that's your point. That's a good point you just made, because there are things that may still be getting the job done and actually are strong enough to get the job done, but still may not meet the standards, like our audio earlier today. But anyway, keep going. What's the next thought we learn?
Yeah, so I got 2 other lessons learned and things moving forward. One's about the ship side and one's about the bridge side. So let's start with the ship. So U.S. Secretary of Transportation went on the public record, and everybody pretty much knows that there was a power failure in the boat. You could even see smoke plumes coming from part of it before it impacted the bridge. And it went through a series of inspections. If you look at the records on the ship, it went through a series of standard inspections, a year prior, 6 months prior. But one of the lessons learned here is if we had an advanced monitoring system that was reporting back, almost like something like a black box in an airplane or something in aviation, I think there's a little bit more concern about the reporting. But if there was a deeper monitoring system that could have been checking the health of the engine systems and the power systems, because it lost power, which means you lose engine, you lose steering, you lose light, you lose everything. Yeah. And there was no way to really detect this in advance. And so there's some professionals who have gone on the record to communicate how we really need to relook at our ship monitoring systems after this incident.
You're right, because there is, we learned that there is the equivalent of a black box. I call it like data something system when we're watching our documentary, Why Ships Crash. But I hear what you're saying too, though. You're talking about like greater monitoring of the like how well the engine is functioning, how well like different systems. And you know where they do that a lot? They do that a lot in like aerospace systems, tremendously. But when it comes to civil, absolutely. And I was talking to somebody about this recently, when it comes to civil, like our industry, Jake, like there are certain things we could learn in terms of the innovation that exists in some of these other industries that can lead to better monitoring and just keeping better tabs on everything. Even with the structure itself, right? Like monitoring the strength of the beams and the truss and like all that. So no, I think that's another phenomenal lesson learned about this, and I'm glad you're able to share that.
Yeah. If you think about like the monitoring of like a nuclear power facility, right? Like they have to be checking everything, because if they miss something and then it spirals out of control, you can have this nuclear meltdown. And it seems like this boat, to your point, I know they have the black box aspect, which records all the data so that you can figure out what happened, but something that would have automatically alerted somebody, the Coast Guard, somebody to say, hey, this boat's having a problem. We think it could lose power.
Out, like without somebody having to call, like it's just boom, power went out. I got you. Yeah.
Exactly. Because by the time they realized it was too late. So clearly, right? And then the third lesson here, so we have one about timing and standards, one about the ship, and then the third one, and you hinted at this, Dr. Nee, when you're drawing your diagram, and correct me here, but I don't think this bridge had dolphins or pier fenders. It's really like a peer support conversation. Should we be beefing that up? I don't even know if it had much of that.
I think, and I don't know this for sure, but I think there may have been some. There were some, right? Okay. And if you look closely, you could probably see some of them being destroyed. Because again, we're talking about a massive ship that's going off course. It's not like even the standard, dolphins isn't going to really like stop it, right? Of course, it may be a deterrent and things like that nature. But I think there were some, but of course, it may not have been sufficient. Again, we're talking about like current standards. So that's something I'm not 100% sure about. But I mean, at the end of the day, we need to make sure that things are where they currently are standard-wise, right?
Yeah, and what I would add to that is there was another event. I have it in my notes. I think there was a bridge impact in 2007 where no one died, and it was a similar size ship, and they had much deeper, not deeper, but much of a more serious peer support or peer defense, fendering dolphins. They really invested in that. And I think this bridge was either the bare minimum or very little of it. And so the experts, it's they're divided. You'll see that engineers and scientists will argue back and forth.
We're not always on the same page. Yeah.
It's the pros and cons of, do we invest in these resources as a what if? But very clearly, when you have human loss of life and you have these big disasters, maybe we should revisit this conversation of really making sure that we beef up our peer support, peer defense system.
Yeah. No, that's good. I'm gonna switch over here. Hey, y'all, chat. If you have any questions for Jake, I want you to put it in the chat right now. We're gonna ask Jake a few more questions before we let him go. But I need to know, as it relates to this particular bridge, the Francis Scott Key Bridge, anything that you've heard about, anything that you are interested or curious about, we're going to see if Jake, we're not saying that Jake has all the answers, but we know he have quite a bit, right? Shout out to you, Jake. So anybody in chat, please drop a question. We're going to take a few more minutes here to see if he can answer some of our chat questions. But Jake, give me a quick overview of the things you do now, or rather the job of a traffic engineer / transportation engineer. Like, give us like that general like day-to-day sort of like workload as we're waiting on any more questions to come in and chat. Like, what does a person that I know, they know what I do, right? As a structural engineer, we're making sure things are able to stand. What does that traffic engineer do, or that transportation engineer do?
Absolutely. And actually, our engineering careers kind of sit side by side, because I focused on transportation, and then within that you have freight, you have air stuff, and I focused on traffic. And then when I went to work for my professional career, I was actually working on what they call travel demand forecasting. And what that really is you have like a 50-year metropolitan plan, and a lot of times my team and I were working on deciding the best location to put a bridge crossing, because it's going to literally impact millions and millions of people for 50 to 75 years. And so there are teams like the teams that I used to work with when I was working as a professional engineer, who, when they rebuild this bridge, they need to look at like, hey, should we even put it here again? Is it the best spot based on what we think economic trends are going to be and that sort of thing? So that's what I did for most of my engineering professional career, was picking where to put these bridges from a traffic perspective.
Right. Like how many cars or whatever vehicles are going to need to come through here, and then how do we plan for that? All right, cool. Let's see. What is your favorite? One quick question. Oh, we got one on screen. Steph Cass said, how did you become a transportation engineer? Did you pick it? Like, why you didn't go the structural route like me? Like, what made you go that route?
It's really funny. So even though you have like your NASA research that integrated into your bridge journey, I actually was kind of maybe biased by somebody who taught me that like, oh, bridge design is boring. It's all cookie cutter and this and that, and it doesn't have the intelligence, which is not really true. And I, back in the day, I could kind of see this driverless vehicle, this like flying car, because cars are going to be flying pretty soon. And I thought that traffic engineering had a really deep connection to technology progression, which still happens in structure, still happens in geotech, but that's why I chose traffic. Yeah. And so it turned out to be right. Look, we got driverless cars now. So
we do have driverless cars now. And you should have talked to me back then. I don't know where you
No, they were wrong.
They were wrong.
They got all these smart sensors on bridges now. Like, you guys are using all the tech, and you integrated your NASA work into your bridge journey.
For sure. All right. So last question. Let's get this really quick. What's your favorite project you worked on? Favorite engineering project? Can you give us that really quick?
So I worked on, fortunately, $3 billion budget projects, and I spent a lot of my professional career in Chicago working on one of those, and then also 2 or 3 in Vancouver and British Columbia. And so Vancouver looks a little bit like San Francisco. You have all this stuff in this little tiny, almost landlocked section. And we worked on a couple of those bridge crossing projects. So my time working internationally on these major bridge expansions, those are my favorite projects.
Well, man, hey, listen, I want to say thank you for hanging out with us today, for bearing with us as well as chat. Chat, y'all give Jake some love really quick, for coming on and hanging out with us on Building Stuff with Nova. Jake, I can't thank you enough for lending your time and your expertise and your knowledge. Even through the hiccups, man, you've been able to give us some really good nuggets as it relates to the Francis Scott Key, someone that grew up in the Baltimore area, someone that knows a lot about transportation and traffic engineering, that branch of civil engineering as opposed to structures, which we've been talking a lot about here on the building committee. Y'all drop some emotes to let us give some much love and much thanks. Off the C111, yes, crowns. We got the hand claps. Chat, show them some love. Building committee, we got to make sure we show them some love here on Nova Building Stuff. Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Dr. Nee. Thank you, Nova. This was a great experience. And yeah, we'll see what we can learn from this engineering disaster. And hopefully we got some young engineers and existing engineers out there listening right now. You guys can make your impact in the world. Thank you, Dr. Nee. Thank you, Nova.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, y'all, listen, I don't know about you, but this was probably the most meta stream I've been a part of, the meta stream, because we're talking about things that go wrong. We're talking about things that are disasters, things that are collapsed. And we've had a little bit of a struggle here audio-wise, but shout out to the building committee that's hung on. And I told you in the beginning of our last VOD that I had a collapse, or maybe not a collapse, but I had an experience when I was second grade, came home from school with my brand new shoes, my most prized possession that day, and I was told by my sister that our house had burned down. Crazy. There in South Georgia, I was able to see that this structure that was my home, my security, something that I took for granted was no longer there. And there's something special about having things that you can remember and rely on that really like serve as that core piece of your experience. However, when things are taken away like that and there's a collapse and there's just a complete change in what your normal is, I believe that there's an opportunity buried in there. And this particular house that burned down when I was in second grade had a shed in the back that fortunately did not burn down. So in the house, I had my Little League trophies. I had my favorite outfits, had every shoe that I loved except for the shoes I had on. And that was all tarred and destroyed. But in that shed in the back, that was the place, y'all, where I used to play with my Legos. I used to go out there in the back and I used to build things, building stuff just like here on the channel with my Legos. And I remember very vividly that how everything else was tarred and black and couldn't be used again. But there was a seed. There was something that remained in the shed that I loved so much. And that was my Lego kit. And that Lego kit, as you can see, led to so many things in my own career. My family began to move to another place because we couldn't stay there anymore. It was like a chain reaction of events. Eventually, my father got a job in a different city, so we moved out of town, and that's where I had my opportunity to get into a NASA internship program before I even graduated high school. Led me down the path of engineering, calling back to those Lego days in the back shed. A sequence of events that eventually led me to staying in school long enough to even pursue a PhD in structural engineering mechanics, to the point that at my graduation, a few months after that, I was attending this church that had, you guessed it, a fire. And they said, chat, that they needed a building committee. And I remember the devastation of everybody at this particular church, the devastation of everybody as a result of this thing that just like was a disaster, a catastrophe. And we were just looking for some way to discover the opportunity in that moment. And there I was able to share my story that I just shared with you all from childhood. And as a result, contribute my expertise as a structural engineer to this building committee to the point that we are now today, this particular church experiencing a brand new facility. What am I saying? I'm saying that for whatever goes wrong for you, whether it's your path in education, whether it's your path in your relationships, whether it's a stream when you're desperately trying to get the audio to work, in that there is something that remains. And I believe that what remains is a lesson to be learned that allows you to build something back, not just where it was, but better than it was, to implement different changes, to bring about a cascading cause and series of events that allows you to look back at something that wasn't fun in the moment and say, you know what? In that catastrophe, there was a seed. There's a seed to build something greater. And so with that being said, I want to encourage and I want to motivate you all to not give up for whatever you're experiencing, whether it's audio issues again, whether it's education, whether it's just you feeling down today. I don't know what you're dealing with, but I'm just so thankful that you hung out with me and us this entire building committee right here on Nova Building Stuff, because I can tell you that we're going to continue to experience the engineering design process, this iterative process of trying things, and it may not work out the first time. And then we look at what we can learn, and then in that failure, we can build back, and then we can try it again. It's a continuous cycle, just like life. So what do we have tomorrow, though? Tomorrow, I'm going to try my hand again, chat. I'm going to try my hand one more time at this thing called this Golden Gate Bridge model. Yes, this was a small model that we got. I don't know where it is now. It's probably hiding somewhere. It was so small. It's probably hiding somewhere among my desk. But there's a little model we're going to put together, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the Golden Gate Bridge, because we have a few more things we want to share with you about structural engineering as we get ready to pivot, y'all, into some other great things coming in weeks to come. We're going to talk about aerospace engineering. We're going to be talking about electrical engineering, computer engineering. We're going to be talking about all different types of engineering. And if you haven't already, this is your first time, now is a good time to click the follow button down below. So shout out to everybody that's hung out with us today. We hope to see y'all again here on Building Stuff with Nova. And I hope y'all can remember that motivational message that, hey, in every catastrophe and everything that goes wrong in engineering, there's an opportunity to look at what remains, learn your lesson, and improve it. That's the engineering design process. And with that, I want to say thank y'all for hanging out with yours truly on Nova Building Stuff. We will see you tomorrow as we continue to build together. Peace.